For almost 30 long years, it was the most visible sign of the bitter division between East and West. 3 decades until the wall fell on November the 9th, 1989. It was the beginning of the end of the so-called Cold War.
You had competition between 2 superpowers, the United States of America and the Soviet Union at the time. And continuously, these 2 superpowers created what was called a patron-client system. They essentially had alliances with states around the world in order to advance their interests literally on a global basis. This is what makes the Cold War so phenomenal.
2 men were at the heart of ending this ongoing political rivalry: Soviet Premier Mikhail Gorbachev and the President of the United States of America, George Bush. Two weeks before the unexpected fall of the Berlin Wall, Malta's then Prime Minister, Edi Fenekadami, received a very unexpected request.
I do remember that I was this normal day at my office. I was Prime Minister at Castile, and I received a phone call from the ambassador of the Soviet Union in Malta. And he told me that he wanted to see me urgently in the company of the ambassador of the United States of America. And they came together. The first thing they said, we're here on behalf of our presidents who have asked us to see you and to put a question to you. And the question was, would Malta host a meeting between President Gorbachev and President Bush in Malta? My immediate reply was, with open arms.
History, like time, does not stand still. And in this case, it had turned full circle.
President Roosevelt and Prime Minister Churchill met here in Valletta on their way to Yalta to meet Stalin. Here they shared notes for a meeting that would basically split Europe in the way that then gave rise to the Cold War.
The Cold War started in Yalta in 1945, and it was going to end in Malta in 89. Formally, an epoch was coming to an end.
It took time to fix a venue for the meeting, but the 2 most powerful men in the world at that time agreed to meet in the Mediterranean, just off the coast of Malta.
Our neutrality has actually made Malta a place which can be trusted, an honest broker, as they call it in the system, where it seeks peace and stability.
Ekkuma, signori, il-wasla ta' Mikhail Gorbachev.
It is a recognition by the 2 biggest powers in the world in those days, and a recognition of our neutrality, especially the fact that neither the Americans nor the Soviets in the height of the Cold War had any time for our neutrality.
President Bush and myself have decided to meet here earlier than the planned visit of the Soviet president to the United States, because we believe that recent developments call for more dynamic dialogue between our countries and our peoples.
The Malta Summit convened on December 2nd and 3rd, 1989, on board Maxim Gorky, a civilian Soviet cruise ship which anchored in the harbor at Marsashlok.
The most important context is the bad weather which struck Malta, in spite of the fact that Malta was always known for having sunny winters.
The tempest we had was extraordinary. The extent to which the leaders still met, I think, is indicative of, without exaggerating, of course, the extent to which the weather was also reflecting this monumental development.
As the Mediterranean Sea was whipped up by winds and rain, Bush and Gorbachev calmly discussed a peaceful future.
As I leave Malta for Brussels and a meeting with our NATO allies, I am optimistic that as the West works patiently together and increasingly cooperates with the Soviet Union, we can realize a lasting peace and transform the East-West relationship to one of enduring cooperation. And that is a future that's worthy of our peoples, and that's the future that I want to help in creating, and that's the future that Chairman Gorbachev and I began right here in Malta. Thank you, sir, for your hospitality.
Although no official agreement was signed, the summit provided a rare opportunity in which the two leaders discussed the radical changes that Europe and the world were experiencing. In spite of the differences, historians argue that the most important result of the Malta summit was the cooperative dialogue Bush and Gorbachev had established.
The two presidents, I think, gained a lot of self-confidence and confidence in each other. And from that moment on, it was clear that the world has changed and that Malta had played a part in it.
That was an extraordinary moment in the history of the world.
The Malta Summit is a historic moment because it actually created a complete transformation of the international system, which resulted in the Cold War no longer continuing.
It was a moment for Malta to sell itself internationally as a place for dialogue.
Not surprisingly, perhaps, that the Malta Summit is widely considered as the symbolic end of the 20th century longest international struggle.
The 1989 summit ended that Cold War. In an era where we are once again faced with a situation of more walls, more wars, more tensions between countries, I think it is very apt to remember the joy we all felt when those tensions, those walls, fell down at the end of the 80s.